I'm Evelyn Gleason from Teach New York, and you're listening to Ed Up Accelerated Excellence.
Leaders, entrepreneurs, and change agents looking for the opportunity to network and exchange ideas with other trailblazers and to further your brand. The 2.0 conference is for you. Experts from the fields of education, health, internet, marketing, and CXO are welcome to take part in the 2025 conference in Las Vegas, March 4th through 6th. Reserve your space today and receive a 10% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EdUpXE10OFF. That's EdUpXE10OFF. Learn more and register online at www.the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EdUpXE10OFF.
Welcome to another episode of EdUp Accelerated Excellence, the podcast for the advancement of educational effectiveness and equity across both traditional and non-traditional learning spaces and experiences. I'm your host, Jacob Easley II, PhD, PMP, and I am going to let my guest introduce herself to the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community. So guest, can you tell us your name, where you're from, and the name of your organization, and any type of salutation you might want to give to the audience?
Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Micia Mosley. I am the director and founder of the Black Teacher Project, originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I'm here representing Oakland, California in this moment.
Oh, Brooklyn in the house. Well, and California.
You know, coast to coast, coast to coast.
I love it, coast to coast. And you know, I think that's appropriate for this episode. So I'm sure you're going to drop some knowledge about coast to coast initiatives to advance equity and effectiveness within the education profession. So let's talk about the Black Teacher Project. For those folks who don't know about it, just give us that sort of elevator pitch of what is the project about? And I like that word project. So we're going to delve into that.
Yes. So we are creating opportunities for Black teachers to reimagine schools as places of liberated learning. We support Black teachers to take up leadership from where they are and transform schools into those places of liberated learning from the classroom. So we believe in leading from the classroom. And we know that, there's a lot of talk about following Black people. But we believe when it comes to education, we need to follow Black educators.
Oh, so, we're going to have to unpack a lot. You mentioned liberation and you talked about leadership from the classroom. So how in this context do you define leadership and how is it operationalized around imagining schools as communities of liberatory learning and practices?
So first, we often take Julian Weissglass's definition of leadership, which is taking responsibility for what matters to you. So you can talk about it or you can be about it. Now, taking responsibility doesn't mean you have to run everything. It does mean that you're going to say, hey, here's my piece. And so when we think about leadership from the classroom, we think about leadership toward our liberation. What matters to you? For some teachers, that may be making sure students learn Black history. For other teachers, it may be making sure students have access to certain resources, making sure that they and their colleagues are well and can sustain themselves. We know that there are educators who say, oh, I see this new teacher coming in. Let me put them up on game about how to navigate this district. So what matters to you may differ, but your ability to take responsibility from the place that you are, that's what we're up to, is giving teachers the knowledge and skills and community to do that, to be able to have real talk about what's going on and not feel like they have to hide or, not tell the full truth of what's happening. We also want to make sure that folks are able to learn from one another. So when we talk about that coast to coast, so many things that Black teachers are facing, so many issues are the same. Different contexts, same anti-Blackness.
So you're in California. You talked about coast to coast. So tell us how you engage teachers. So are you localized only in California, or what's the scope and the reach?
So we started in California, in person back in 2015, gathering teachers, listening to teachers, trying to understand what the needs were. So from the beginning, we wanted to make sure we were responsive. And you know how folks who used to teach, who are now in nonprofits or in other roles, try to tell teachers what you need to do. Here's what I got to help you. And we said, no, let's listen to the folks we're trying to serve. So that's something I learned as a key organizing principle. Shout out to the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond out of New Orleans. They trained me up, and you are accountable to your base. So if our base are Black teachers, we are accountable to them. So we listened, and there were some localized things that needed to happen, just thinking about Black folks in California, which is just a whole different setup than on the East Coast. But because I'm from Brooklyn, I said, hey, I can't just keep all the goodness out here. We got to try to do something over there. So, and talking to Black teachers in New York and building with them, building partnerships out there with the Schomburg and other organizations to really support Black teachers there. Cut to 2020, pandemic hits. Everything goes online. So all of the in-person programming we were doing around leadership, around wellness, Black identity development, quality instruction, all of that goes online. We become national because anybody can access what we're doing. And so then we started to try to support folks to know each other where they are. As we got back into person, we said, okay, now how do we, and even prior to the pandemic, we had started to do some work in Chicago, started to do some work in Charlottesville, Virginia. But coming out of the pandemic, we said, how do we keep the virtual? Because there are people who, I might be in a city with Black people, but I might be the only Black teacher at my school or one of a few in the district. So that isolation is still there. They're still looking for community. But how do we also support people to help each other in person where they are without feeling like we have to have chapters everywhere? Sometimes that chapter mentality can feel a little colonial, like, oh, we're going to put our flag here, put our flag there. We want to organize people in different places. And then based on what the base there needs, understand how we can be of service.
So that really is coast to coast.
Absolutely.
And in this sense, the pandemic served as a catalyst for growth.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. What have you found to be the most difficult component of this work so far? Mm-hmm. And how have you faced that challenge, and what results have you seen?
I think one of the most difficult components is really making the case for folks to stay in the classroom. So, we've been back and forth. I often say Black teachers don't leave the profession, they leave the classroom. So we'll have Black educators, and we've all started using that language because we understand the importance of support in and out of the classroom. I want to be really clear about that. And we need strong pedagogues. We need folks who have been teaching for more than 3 or 5 years, who know what they're doing and who can help prepare the next generation and do it well in changing times. And so it's been a hard sell since 2015 to try to work with teachers around really staying in the classroom when money gets tight. Obviously, the pandemic changed so much. So we lost a lot of folks there who said, I don't want to do this online thing. Like my relationship with my students is about proximity. But then coming on the other side of that, still seeing the anti-Blackness, seeing the low pay. So for us, finances and trying to, work inside of a nonprofit industrial complex, and the deprofessionalization of teaching and what that means for Black folks who want to teach, but also are professionals and want to be acknowledged as such. So those two have been really challenging. Now, how we've met that is to be creative. So, I keep telling people, if you're only doing this because somebody's funding you, you're in the wrong business. Right? We need to understand that this is really about our liberation, and our ancestors weren't getting grants from so-and-so foundation. That's bonus. I love it. And to any funders listening, we will happily take your money. Don't get me wrong. But that the work can't stop there. The work doesn't start there, and it can't stop there. So part of it is about building a sense of community that goes beyond traditional capitalist structures. So we get in front of that by saying, know the Black teachers in your community. What can y'all do for each other? How can we be of service? Now, a lot of that is when when people invest in the Black Teacher Project, we make sure that money is going back out to teachers. So we provide grants to teachers. When folks are engaged in professional development with us over time in a cohort, we pay them. And we don't pay them just to like show up and look cute. We're paying folks for their professional labor, to say, as you are building out these practices to support students, as you are engaged in these leadership projects, they shouldn't be something that you're just doing on the side because you want to. You deserve to be compensated. So part of how we support folks in staying in the classroom is dealing with, hey, I can't control what the salary is that you make, but I can offer you some compensation for this extra labor that we're asking you to do. And that helps both with some of the financial funkiness, but it also helps folks stay because they're like, oh, I'm part of a community of folks who are really trying to create change where they are.
Experts from the fields of education, health, internet, marketing, and CXO are welcome to take part in the 2025 2.0 conference in Las Vegas, March 4th through 6th. Reserve your space today and receive a 10% discount courtesy of EDUP Accelerated Excellence with the code EDUPXE10OFF. That's EDUPXE10OFF. Learn more and register online at www.the2canf.com. That's the2canf.com with the code EDUPXE10OFF.
So you mentioned a couple of words. I'm hearing community a lot. And I think you've referred to it as push out. So push out factors, the conditions that push folks out of the profession, particularly in this case, the classroom. Mm-hmm. So outside of community, what have you found to be perhaps the most significant factor or condition that leads to retention, particularly for teachers in general, but particularly for Black teachers?
Yeah. So in addition to community, clarity around their role in leadership and results. So when folks are feeling effective, and again, leadership, it's not about getting a title. People confuse that. And by the way, it's also not about more work because people will get more responsibility and then try to call teachers leaders. And you just gave them extra work. If you're not, I say this to folks all the time, when we're talking about leadership opportunities, we're talking about decision-making power and budgets. Give me resources. Don't just give me more work to do and then I can't make a decision or I don't have the resources to enact my vision. So what we've seen that really helps people stay in the classroom and thrive, not just hang around the classroom, but thrive, is when they're able to become leaders, to say like, oh, I went from this vision of starting a wellness group to now we have a whole center because of, in our case, some of the work that they do in our programming, collecting data that it's helpful to their students, taking that to their principals and the powers that be. And now all of a sudden, that's a whole program for the school. Now we're working with leaders to say like, are you giving that Black teacher credit? Or are you just co-opting that idea? That's another story for another time. But what helps teachers feel effective and stay is when they're actually able to see their visions be manifested. And that, that's why we all get into it, right? We get into it for young people and we get into it to make a difference in their lives.
You are an expert in data or evidence-based inquiry. How do you ensure that data are used not just to highlight inequities, but also to inspire actionable and sustainable improvements?
Yes. Well, I think it's about mixed methods, right? So we need to look at quantitative data. What's actually happening with our numbers? What's happening with the number of people that we're reaching, with student achievement? But the qualitative data are also really, really important. Not simply stories for storytelling's sake, but to understand the nuances that are behind some of the statistical data that we may see. And I'll give you an example. So we may look at the number of students. I'm thinking about one of our teachers who was in our liberatory design lab, where they co-constructed wellness practices with students. So you can look and say, oh, over the course of this semester in this fifth grade class, their reading scores went up, which they did. But the qualitative data will tell you that her wellness practice of students giving each other affirmations as a structural part of her lesson plan daily had a direct impact, and it was directly correlated to the increase in those scores. Now, we can say, oh, affirmations are cute, affirmations are nice, but when you actually listen to the students, when she tells you part of what happened for students and what allowed them to do more of the work to learn how to read at a higher level, how that was correlated with that wellness practice, you can just look at that data point, the statistical data point, but being able to get the nuance, being able to get the underneath is important, because then we want to know, why were you successful? If we understand that, then we know what's possible to replicate.
So that's powerful. And I think that really does exemplify a component of leadership. So being able to make a case for the decisions you're making, particularly when your decisions may be aberrant or disparate from what is the norm in a school. Because many schools have what we call structured or managed curricula.
Yes.
And so there's a lockstep approach to how you deliver instruction. And so if you're going to do something different, I think it is important to arm yourself as a leader in the classroom with sound evidence of your practice. But that example you gave was to me, I say powerful, because you're talking about affirmations that help students to reconcile or to deepen their own sense of how they feel about themselves. So the Black Teacher Project places importance on creating conditions for rejuvenation. What practices or approaches have you seen to be that make the biggest difference in sustaining Black teachers emotionally and perhaps even professionally through rejuvenation? What does that look like?
It's coming back to self. It's that right? That coming back to. And so if we start with the premise that we are all born whole, perfect, and complete. So, and then society does what it does. So now we're trying to get back to the understanding, the truth of who we are, right? And so for us, when I think about our wellness programs, there's something about being in Black racial affinity that is like nothing else. Like now, in social media and all this, people talking about the cookout or the family reunion or this and that. But what we know is that when we gather with intention, it is a coming home. And so, and I say with intention because you can be in a room full of Black folks and it can be toxic. We don't like to talk about that part. But when you're asking me about rejuvenation, you don't have rejuvenation without intentionality, right? And so that coming back to self is one, understanding that that's necessary. So when I think about our wellness offerings, we want to make sure that folks are clear what you're getting well from. Harm has been done, but we're not going to stay in the harm place and the complaint, but we need to understand it, because unfortunately we've normalized some harms. Oh, that's just how it is, right? That we don't realize, no, we deserve better and we can have better. So that when we come together, we don't have to perform these things that are outside of humanity, that are outside of who we naturally are. We get to just be. But it's, even when we use the language just be, it actually takes effort because we've been so conditioned. I don't know how many folks actually have read The Miseducation of the Negro. Folks will know Carter G. Woodson and will drop a name, but sometimes people will have a book but not open it. But if you read it and you understand what he's talking about, you understand the re-education that's needed. So the rejuvenation and the re-education go hand in hand. And when we can tap in to the knowledge of who we truly are, it fills us with a spirit that we don't often get in professional settings. And at the Black Teacher Project, we know that you spend most of your time at work, you need and deserve that in a professional setting.
You know, we met at the convening for Black male educators in Philadelphia. But you just talked about this idea of rejuvenation and Carter G. Woodson. And it brings to mind this thought of the Negro knowing his place. So I'm going to gender specific. I mean, you know, it's sort of dated in time. So the Negro knowing his or her place in society. But as you were talking, it made me think about rejuvenation, how you flip that historical construct of knowing one's place, particularly around Jim Crow or post-slavery, where you're mindful of don't cause troubles, don't bring attention to yourself, because it could be harmful in certain contexts.
Absolutely.
So how would you think about that today in contemporary times of what does it mean now to know your place?
It's to know your history of resistance and liberation. So knowing our place inside of the project that is the United States has us on the bottom. It has us subservient. It has us enslaved, if not physically, certainly mentally. But if you know your place inside of a liberatory history, you know that we're always working for the freedom, not only of ourselves, but of future generations. And, I've on this side of 50, I've definitely become the person that's like, these kids today, this generation. And I told myself I wasn't going to be that auntie, but I'm totally that auntie. And so what I find is that for many of us, the quick, I need to see it now experience has interrupted the centuries old legacy of 7 generations, if you want to hark back to Native American culture, of looking toward the future. What we're doing now, great if we benefit from it, but it's for the future. Our ancestors who were enslaved, they weren't thinking about no podcasts with you, we chopping it up on over the internet. But they knew about the stars. They knew about something that connected us beyond time and space. They knew that there was something greater than the physical experience they were in. So in these times, people got all freaked out with the presidential election and then the Senate and all. Yep. Also, the work toward freedom doesn't stop. The specifics of what we are up to may shift, but we can't be distracted. And so our place is about creating a future for our descendants to step into. Our place is to practice being good ancestors while we're still here on earth. And so if you understand that, you get to have the joy of living this life. It's a beautiful thing to be able to be alive and understand that our responsibility is for something more.
I'm feeling rejuvenated, actually. So
I'm glad.
Let's imagine, if you don't mind, take a walk with me. So you're the lead of the Black Teacher Project. What would the project say to that Black teacher in rural Connecticut or some other place who's the only Black teacher in that school? What would you say to that person to edify them?
Find community. You've made a choice, right? So here's the other thing we have to be really clear about in 2024. We have choices. There is a reason why that person is there. So one, get clear about your why. Why are you there? You don't have to judge it, but you want to get real clear for yourself, right? There's something that draws you there, keeps you there. I don't know what it is, but you need to know. What is yours to do in that space? right? And then find your community. You're going to find community that looks like you, and it may be online with other Black teachers through the Black Teacher Project. It may be at convenings that you go to quarterly, where you leave that area and come to some other place where you can be with more like-minded folks. It may be with people who look different from you. And part of your work is cross-racial alliance work. But find your people, because Western culture has us in an individualistic approach to life. But, if you read Zaretta Hammond's work or anybody else's work who talks about African-centered anything, we are collectivist people, as are most of the folks in the global majority. So we understand that our lives are intertwined. So, and what I love about the example that you gave is that folks in rural communities know this much better than people in cities. Folks in rural communities know what I do to the water affects the water down the way. If I need help, my neighbors and I may not be besties, but we depend on one another. And so when you understand that, you understand the importance of having strong community ties. And so I would say to that teacher, be clear about who your community is. Why are you there? Who's your community? What are you up to? Right? And so when you have that clarity, it can support you in having peace, because you're not thinking, I should be someplace else. I should be doing something else. You're clear on what's yours to do. And that's part of the challenge with the internet and all this. We think we should be doing something else. Well, look at them. Look at them. They over there. That's not you. What you worried about them for?
And a lot of that could be curated, and it's not actually true.
I'm saying.
So think about the person who is interested in the profession or just starting out as a teacher. What advice would you add to or modify with regard to what you shared about the rural teacher in Connecticut?
Yep. Mentorship. So mentorship comes in all forms, right? And so many programs that prepare teachers have a role of mentor. The challenge is you can't tell somebody that they're somebody else's mentor. That's not quite how it works, right? It's like a relationship. Right? It's kind of like an arranged marriage. Like culturally, okay, it could work. Listen, the hundreds, thousands of years, it could work in a particular culture. But in this culture, when you tell someone that this is your mentor, you then still have to negotiate the relationship. And so I think for the person who's starting out, who are your mentors, plural? Who's in your village? So mentors help you figure out where you're going, right? Your village also includes people who are right where you are, and you need peers, right? And then as you're continuing to grow, who's behind you that you're bringing? You're part of a continuum always. So if you are 22 years old and just starting out, or if you're 20 years old and you're in college and you're taking education courses, there is a middle schooler who likes to tutor elementary school students, who wants to be a camp counselor. Like, you're part of this continuum of folks looking back and saying, let me help you through this. So understanding who's in your village and interrupting the notion that you should be doing it alone. And I will say, it's a tie for the two, and I think they're linked. Learn how to build strong relationships and be excellent at your craft. Now, I believe that being excellent at your craft includes building strong relationships. What is important, the reason why I want to highlight both of those is that far too often folks are over-reliant on the relationality element of teaching. My kids love me. They're in my classroom at lunch, this and that. They always, they're giving me hugs. How come they can't read? How come? Is it that you don't know how to teach them how to read? Okay, so you weren't prepared to do that because you're an 8th grade science teacher. I get that. Cool. So where are you going to learn how to teach them how to read? How are you going to take the strong relationship you have with them and transition that into them wanting to read books about science with you? So sometimes we confuse the stroking of our ego or how good we feel. It's like, oh, did the babies learn? Well, I taught it. If they didn't learn it, you didn't teach it. You might have said it. You might have moved through your lesson plan. But being excellent at your craft means that the young people in front of you are learning. And I believe that that doesn't happen without strong relationships. And strong relationships isn't always being liked. In that warm demander, people forget about that warm demander now. You know, how many teachers do we have in our past that's like, oh, so-and-so was mean, but I knew they loved me. I knew they had me. But man, they were up my behind.
What we mean by that is they never gave up on you and you couldn't get away with anything. So there were expectations, and the expectation was that you're going to meet the expectations.
That part.
And we're going to find ways to help you to meet those expectations. So, yeah.
And as the educator, you're not alone. So I think one of the things for the new teacher to recognize is that this is not a superhero complex. And that's why I say know who's in your village, because too often we have the story of the teacher. And so we get back into this Western culture individual, as opposed to understanding I'm in a partnership with the families. And if there's stuff going on at home where families maybe can't show up in the ways I expect, who else loves this child? How do we wrap around to make sure that they get what they need, as opposed to me? Because that's what leads to burnout. When you feel like you are the soul, it's an ego thing. I got to do it. I got it. No. We're a village.
You know, that takes us back to the top of the show when you led with this idea of community. But this is a different phase of community. So one is community as teachers, but this is the idea that community exists beyond the walls of the classroom as well. So you have community allies who you can lean on. You have parents and guardians and community members who can also serve as a resource in the educative process.
Absolutely.
So I really like that.
Yeah.
So the project, the Black Teacher Project, is going along really well. What is the North Star? So what is something that you would like to accomplish that you haven't yet had a chance to delve into?
I would like to have communities across the country where veteran and retired teachers Black teachers have very clear and organized, structured ways to support new teachers. Those middle of the career teachers are in the mix. Like when we talk about communities of liberated learning, I want, people move all the time. So I want, if someone moves to DC or someone moves to Atlanta, it's not just about, what are the Black educator orgs that I can be involved in? Here's a community where folks are pouring back into one another, where I can see myself and I can understand what I have to offer to someone else. So this project is really, in the times that we're in, schools are more and more segregated. We know this. And there is a way that I believe people are leaning into Black affinity, but haven't yet figured out how we can really use it to its fullest potential. And the distinction between segregation and affinity is all about agency, right? Who gets to decide what happens with my body? You telling me I can't go someplace because your law is segregation. Me saying I choose to be here because of a connection is affinity. And so that North Star of having communities where folks can come in and learn from each other, where folks know the truth of their history, and we can really have African-centered teaching as part of our normalized practice, and not just for Black kids. Like if you understand the components, it benefits all children. But it's a reprogram and a re-education that I'm really interested in.
I think that's not even a postcard. That's like a banner. You remember those, well, there were airplanes that would write messages in the sky
Yes.
in the summer. So
Yes.
this notion of the work that you're doing, yes, you're centering the work of Black teachers, but what you just stated says that this work benefits all.
Absolutely. I mean, our tagline is every child deserves a Black teacher. And that's been from the beginning. I'll put it to you this way. Malcolm Gladwell has an episode on, I don't even know if he has his podcast anymore, but it was...
He does. It's one of my favorites.
Yes. Miss Buchanan's, I can't remember the end of it, but it's talking about integration. And what he raises in that episode is essentially, what if we had integrated in the other direction? What if we had sent white children to Black schools? We would have had to resource those Black schools because white families aren't going to let their kids have no books and terrible buildings, right?
Right.
But what would it have done for race relations? What would it have done when you think about warm demanders, when you think about the love of learning as a way to liberate yourself? The problem is that, public education was created for capitalism, who are the owners, managers, and workers. And so we haven't left that consciousness, but for Black people, it was about freedom. It wasn't just freedom as defined by getting a good job. It was learn how to read so you could know yourself. It wasn't just learn how to read to get a good job. And so when we think about every child deserving a Black teacher, we are coming with an approach and a consciousness that can really shift our human experience, particularly in this country. That's in general. But more specifically, too often non-Black children, and I don't just mean white, I mean non-Black children, only see Black people in media. Their parents, we're asking schools to do things that communities won't. We're not really integrated. We don't live near each other. And even when we do, we're not mixing in the same ways, right? So for a lot of non-Black children, they only see Black people in the media, or if they do have Black people in their personal lives, it's often in the role of service. And there's nothing wrong with being of service. But what that means is that you haven't been prepared to learn from Black adults, to take instructions from Black adults. So what happens when you get a job? Now I'm on the job and I have a Black boss and I'm acting out because I don't have a consciousness that Black people have something to teach me. So when we say every child deserves a Black teacher, they deserve to understand the brilliance of Black people and to benefit from that brilliance, benefit from the love that we carry just on jump. I mean, and Nikki Giovanni, who recently passed, there's a lot of videos of her going around, and she talks about how she was speaking specifically of Black women, but I think it's true for Black people across gender, that we are going to come with love. We're going to figure out how to love you in the most challenging of circumstances. And we see that with Black teachers. And I believe every child deserves love, and they certainly deserve it in school.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. So how can the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community engage in the work and or support the work of Dr. Micia Mosley first? And then I want to then talk about how can they work with engage and support the Black Teacher Project. So what's next on the horizon for you? Speaking engagements, any major projects? Because as a fully actualized adult, yes, you're leading the Black Teacher Project, but you're also a performer, an artist. You have a lot of other projects and initiatives that are afoot.
Yes. So I will say for me, stay tuned for comedy shows. I believe that it's important to be able to be fully self-expressed. And so my first love is education. And I was voted class comedian in high school and I stand by it. So I've been doing stand-up comedy and performance for a couple of decades now. So I try to create space for that for myself, just in my full self-expression. I'm working on a few writing pieces now. One is a chapter in a book on healing teaching, and talking about the role of wellness and healing for educators. So that should be out at the end of next year. So be on the lookout for that, and working on some op-eds, of course. But, I would say, the speaking engagements come. I'm blessed to be invited to share my voice in those ways. And the best way that when I think about what it means to support me, it's more examples of people being their full selves. I don't want to be a unicorn out here. I want to be the person who's like, oh yeah, Micia leads the Black Teacher Project, and she's also a comedian. And it's like, oh well, so and so they do this and they do that because that's on their heart. And so, I feel like as more, and this is that time of year where folks are thinking about what's going to be true for them in the future,
Right.
Visioning. And what's that thing that you've been sitting on? And here's the thing, everything doesn't have to be a job. There can be things that we do, but just because we love doing it. And so decoupling capitalism from what's on our heart. I would hope that people aren't out here raising children just to get the tax break.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, but think about it. There's stuff you do because it's on your heart to do.
Okay, so there you go. Where can we find this show? Because you just made me laugh. So where's your upcoming show?
So MiciaMosley.com, which is my personal website, is where you can find some of the shows. We're a little bit under construction right now, but I'm taking a little break for January. I've got some shows here in the Bay Area, and putting some stuff together on the East Coast in February and March. So that'll be the next time, but that's the place you can find out about that.
Oh, when you come to the East Coast, I'm going to be in the front row, I tell you. So, and then for the Black Teacher Project, how can folks engage and support that work?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, connect with the Black teachers in your communities, right? And I say that because, of course, we want you to spread the word about our work, but our work is ultimately about supporting Black teachers. So if you have young people in your life, ask them if they have Black teachers. Ask those Black teachers how they're doing. What do they need? So I say this all the time because people think about, there's so many of us as organizations that are supporting Black teachers, but I'm like, do you know that your child has a Black teacher? Do you know anything about their experience? So once you get there, then let them know about our work. You can do that through our website. We're pretty active on LinkedIn and Instagram. We have a lot of folks who can access our virtual programming. So we've got a couple of workshops for Black teachers that are coming up. We've got workshops so one of the things I should say is most of our work is supporting Black teachers and racial affinity, but we also have a lot of work that is supporting the ecosystems that they're in. So in the spring, we're offering a workshop on creating racial affinity groups, and that's open to folks across race, in part because we want to make sure that when we're talking about educational equity, everyone's got to do their own work. So we need racial affinity groups for everyone, and not just groups for people to get together and kiki. And so one of the things I would be remiss, I don't want to leave without saying, we're known for our work in racial affinity, and we believe that there are three reasons why you organize in racial affinity, and that's to heal, learn, and organize. We all need healing from racism and for the effects of oppression. We all need to learn about ourselves and others, and we need to organize to actually create the change that we want to see.
I like that. Heal, learn, organize. Again, you keep going back to community and liberation.
Yes.
And part of that, though, is also rejuvenation.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, I think when you begin to invest in one's own development, that is an act of leadership and an act of love.
Absolutely.
So the website is blackteacherproject.org.
Yes.
blackteacherproject.org. Dr. Mosley, I want to thank you for this time to learn from and with you here at EdUp Accelerated Excellence.
Thank you so, so much. It's been my pleasure. I'm Dr. Micia Mosley, and we're here on the podcast, EdUp Accelerated Excellence. Thank y'all so much for having me.
A special thanks to our research assistant for this episode, Emily Bloom, graduate student researcher at Fordham University, studying in the Mental Health Counseling program. And we want to hear from you. If you have feedback on this or other episodes, contact us online at edupxe.com, that's edupxe.com.
Thank you for engaging with EdUp Accelerated Excellence, a member of the EdUp Experience network of educational podcasts. You can find this and other episodes on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Radio. If you like this episode, don't forget to follow and share within your network.